بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ما بعد. We stopped last week at the chapter of Tayammum. We didn't start at Tayammum. Last week we did the things that are, or that obligate a person making a ghusl. When does a person have to make a full bath, as we said? And we discussed the times when it's obligatory to make a ghusl in order to pray or do other things. And we continue tonight with the chapter of the ghusl. The chapter of Tayammum. Tayammum, which a lot of times here, people call it Tayamum, which is incorrect, but it's a pronunciation that's become famous, Tayamum, which is not the correct pronunciation, but it should be Tayammum. So firstly, what is Tayammum? Tayammum is to wipe the face and the hands, to wipe the face, masah al-wajh wal yadayn, to wipe the face and the hands up into the wrist bone, this part of the hand only up into the wrist bone, with dust, as we say, or dirt. Not necessarily dirt, but let's just say the remnants of dirt, dust, in a specific manner, specific way to do it. And this chapter discusses the conditions for making the Wudhu this way, or not the Wudhu, the purification. As a Tayammum is a form of purification, and that's why it comes in the chapter of the Tahara. Of course, the origin, the asl, is that when we cleanse and purify ourselves, that we use water. That's the origin. But there may come a time or a situation where a person, for one reason or another, a person is not able to use water. They're not able to use water, so in that case, it is not that we don't pray, but there's another way to prepare ourselves for the salat, for the prayer, other than using water. And this chapter will discuss the conditions for not using the water for making the wudu. So the author, rahimahullah, says, فَصْلٌ يَصِحُ التَّيَمُّمُ بِتُرَابٍ طَهُورٍ مُبَاحٍ لَهُ غُبَارٍ. He says first, then he describes the type of, he says, when can a person do this, a tayammum, which sometimes is called dry wudu. Dry wudu. Dry, it's not wet like water, it's dry. Right? It's not necessarily wudu, it has a different name, tayammum. Tayammum can be correct if a person uses turab, dirt, tahur, that is clean or pure, meaning it's not something that has najis in it. You don't go to some dirt where people use it. For example, they use that area for outside bathroom. Everybody knows in the park, this area over here is used for the bathroom. You don't go to that area to use the dirt in that area. Mubah. That the dirt that is used is mubah, that it is permissible to use. It's not stolen from anyone else. It's not taken without any right, but it is mubah. One. That's three. That's three. All of these are the descriptions. These are the descriptions of the dirt, really. The descriptions of the dirt. That the dirt is dirt, number one, is pure. There's no najis on it. It's mubah. It's not stolen or anything like that. And that, lastly, that it has a ghubar. It has some dust that comes off of it. Now, even with the issue of what you can make this tayammum with or not, the scholars differ. Does it have to have dirt? Does it have to have the dust that stays on your hand once you touch it? Some differ, and they go into the khilaf of that based on the ayah in the Quran. So some say it doesn't actually have to have dust on it, and some say it has to be dirt, which means if it's dirt, they exclude things like some they exclude things like sand. Right? Some allow sand, and they differ. Ulama differ in this area. So this is one thing. The safest thing, of course, is to use the dirt that we know, and he'll get to the description of how to use it. But the dirt that we know, the normal dirt, earth, soil, right, that leaves some type of dust on the hand when you touch it. But when is a person able to do this? He says, إِذَا عِدِمَ الْمَاء لِحَبْسٍ أَوْ غَيْرِهِ. A person is only able to make the dry ablution and make the dry wudu, meaning you have to use water. The asl is that we have to use water for wudu or ghusl. But if a person, due to the fact that, number one, there is no water. Let's say, for example, a person is not able to get to the water. So there's water there, but it's locked in the office, for example, and it's time to pray. There is no key to the office. They can't just break the door down. They can't break into the store next door to steal anybody's water. So the water is there, but it's locked away where they can't get it. Or the water is there, but the person is locked away. Maybe a person's in jail, they won't let them out. They've been held captive, they won't let them out to get to the water. The fact is that they're not able to get to the water. As long as we're able to use water, then the obligation is to use water. We have to use water. It's not an option. A tayammum is not an option between water and not using water. A tayammum is used when a person is not able to get to water. So they say, for example, the water is locked away. Oh, khifa bistimalihi. Or a person, honestly, in their heart, they fear some type of harm if they use that water. Meaning, it might be cold outside. Maybe the weather conditions. They feel like if they use the water, maybe it might cause a sickness. Or maybe they're already sick, and if they use water, it might make it worse. So they fear using the water. أو طلبه ضرر ببدنه أو مال أو غيرهما. Or a person fears that, okay, they know where the water is, they can get to the water, but they fear that if they go to look for the water, they think the water is in such and such place, right? So they say they fear, but if I go over there, there might be something harmful, right? Maybe it's not a good area to go in. Maybe there's some problems over there, they don't want to go near that area. Some real problems, not these, again, this is not an option. Tayammum, not using water is not an option. So there has to be some harm. I fear if I go over there, something might happen, and I don't want to put myself in that type of predicament. Or they fear that something may happen to their wealth, their money, something that they own, right? If I leave my money here, if I leave my stuff here, I come back, I don't think it's going to be here, right? In order to what? Why are they leaving their stuff? They're leaving their stuff to go check for the water, right? So in that case, they will fall under the ruling of being able to use the water. Why? Because of the fear that they're not able to get to it. They're not able to get to it. So a tayammum is not restricted to the fact that there is no water, but it's possible there is water, but the person is not able to get to it. All of that falls under the same ruling. There's water, but a person isn't able to get to it, or there is no water at all. طيب. He says after that, rahimahullah, وَيُفْعَلُ عَنْ كُلِّ مَا يُفْعَلُ بِالْمَاءِ سِوَى نَجَاسَةٍ عَلَى غَيْرِ بَدَنٍ. Once a person makes tayammum, I'll call it wudu with dirt, right, just so we're clear. Once a person makes the wudu with the dirt, with the dust, they can do anything that they will be able to do if they make wudu with water. Meaning they can pray, right? They can read the Mus'haf, they can relax in the masjid. Everything that you're able to do with If you made wudu with water, you can do wudu with tayammum, with dust. And he'll go into more detail. He says, except the only thing that you won't be able to do with tayammum that you can do with water is, he says, except for najasa ala ghayr al-badan. Except for if there's some najasa, some filth on, or let's say some filth, some najas that's not on your body. Meaning it's on your clothing, if there's some water on, if there's some, let's just say, person has a dog. So they go outside to feed the dog, because of course the dog shouldn't be in the house of a Muslim. They go outside to feed the dog, and they get some dog urine on their clothes, right? You can't make tayammum to remove the dog urine off of your clothes. Or it's dog urine on the ground, or it's urine on the ground. You can't make tayammum for the ground. Okay, as long as it's not on the body. But what if the najis is on the body? All right? Meaning, mathalan, the dog urinates and it gets on a person's foot. Now let's say a person, for example, they're injured. They're not able to bend down that low. They can't get it off. Do they have water in the house? They have water in the house. Remember, tayammum is not only it's no water at all, right? You're in a situation where you can't get to the water, or there's a situation, these specific situations. The asl is where you use water. We have to use water, that's the origin. In certain circumstances, we're allowed to use dirt or dust. So if a person can't get the filth or the najis or urine off of their body, then they're able to make tayammum for that area that's on their bodies, not for the stuff that's not on the body. That's why he says, except for the najasa that is not on the body. So you can use the tayammum. You can make tayammum for the najis that's on the body, but you can't make tayammum for the najis that's not on the body. If it's on the ground, if it's on your clothing, then you can't make tayammum for that. It says next, when is a person allowed to actually make the tayammum? Because now the situation is, I'm in a situation where I'm allowed to use dust or dirt. I'm allowed to use it. Now the question is when. He says, إِذَا دَخَلَ وَقْتُ فَرْضٍ. When the time for that obligatory prayer enters, when the time for the obligatory prayer comes in. Meaning, for example, it's not time for Isha. So if I'm going to make tayammum, I'm not going to make tayammum right now. I'm going to wait until Isha, wait for the adhan of Isha, and then I will make tayammum for that prayer. What's the benefit of that? You might come past some water. That's the benefit, to wait it out as long as possible, just in case you're able to get water before that time, right? Because the tayammum is like last resort. It's last resort. And that's why he's going to mention that even that a person has to go looking for water first before they just make tayammum. Now we just look around, I don't see no water in here, we don't check in the areas closest to us to see if we can get water. That a person has to check around, as they say, bath. They search to see if they can get some water to use first. If they come up with nothing, then they are able to make tayammum. So a person can make the tayammum once the salat comes in, once the next obligatory prayer comes in. And he's going to get to it. They say that it's better to not pray as soon as it comes in. Meaning the salat, the time is, we know the time, the salat has a time frame. They said it is better, not that you have to, it's better to wait even longer than maybe a person is able to get some water before they make it to tayammum. But number one is that it has to be time for that prayer. Number two, what will be ghayruhu. Or the second time, also one of this, a person makes the actual tayammum when something becomes permissible for them to do. For example, say for example, it's permissible, for example, to pray after the sun rises. right? Salatul Duha. So once the time period comes that it's permissible for a person to pray, then they can make tayammum so they can pray that prayer. You with me? Once the time becomes open and it's permissible for you to do something, then you can make the tayammum at that time. Meaning, the point is that not to make the tayammum so early, and then you actually have the ability to get water. So the idea is to hold out as long as possible, hoping that you can get water to make wudhu of water. If not, then this is the alternative, the other option. Tayyib. So the next question is, what happens if a person has water, but they don't have enough water to make wudhu with? They have water, but not enough water to make wudhu. Do they make tayammum? It's not enough water to make wudhu.
Does he cover what he can with the water and then finish with the tayammum, or
Jade.
although it does?
Cover what he can with the water, and then make tayammum. Right? There's water there, it can be used, it's accessible, you can get to it, it's not locked away, it's there. There's water here, it's not enough water. They say, when wajada ma'an la yakfi ta'alatahu. But it's not enough, I can't make wudu with this. It's not going to be enough to make wudu with. Or ghusl with. Ista'malahu thumma tayammum. And he uses, or she uses that water that's available, and then after that, they make tayammum for the rest of the body. Make tayammum for the rest of the body. Point being that if the water is available, use water that's available. If you can stretch it so that you don't have to make tayammum, great. If not, then you use what you can and then you make tayammum for the other body parts. طيب. He says, rahimahullah, وَيَتَيَمَّمُ لِلْجُرْحِ عِنْدَ غَسْلِهِ إِنْ لَمْ يُمْكِنْ مَسْحُهُ بِالْمَاءِ. If a person has a scar, right, they have a injury. Person has an injury, right? And they're not able to wipe it. The injury is so sensitive that they can't wipe it. Because we know of the case if they have an injury and they have a bandage or a cast, they can wipe that, right? But sometimes the injury is so bad that they can't even touch it, they can't even wipe it at all. So he says that a person makes tayammum for that injury in the ghaslihi. If they're making wudu and they get to that area, where they're injured. For example, they're making wudu, they do their face, they do the mouth, the nose, they do their face, they do the right arm, they do the right hand, the right arm, then the left hand is injured. Once they get to the left hand, they make tayammum for the left hand, right? Because they can't wipe it. If they can wipe it, it'd be a different situation. But they can't wipe it, so they make tayammum for the left arm when they get to the left arm. وَيَغْسِلُ الصَّحِيحِ. And of course, they wash everything else. Everything that can be washed is washed. Sticking to the original wudu. Whatever can be washed is washed. If something comes and it needs to be wiped, the person had a bandage on, then they will wipe it. But what if they can't even wipe it? They can't wipe it, then they make tayammum for their body part. For that body part that can't be washed. طيب. He mentions another condition. وَطَلَبُ الْمَاءِ شَرْطٌ. The next condition is to look for water before a person just results to making tayammum. That it's not like an optional thing, right? Everything has to be, this is last result. Last result, it's not like we can't pray. If we have to, we can make tayammum. But let's look for water first. So what if a person, as he says, a condition for tayammum is that first you look for water. So what if a person doesn't look for water and they just make tayammum and pray? They never looked. Right. It's not permissible. That salah would be invalid, right? Because the wudu is invalid because they didn't even look for water. طيب فإن نسي قدرته عليه وتيمموا أعاده. طيب, what if a person, the person who they knew they were able to get the water, right? They were able to get to the water, but they actually forgot. They forgot about the water. They knew how to get to the water. They could get to the water, but they forgot. They forgot. And they prayed like that. So they prayed with tayammum. Was it water available? It was water available, but at the same time, the person forgot that it was water available. So it's not like they intentionally prayed without using the water. They prayed without the water, yes, but not intentionally. Number two, they were able to get to it. It was there, they were able to get to it, but they forgot that they were able to get to it, and they prayed like that. What would they have to do? Are they okay?
Did they remember after they finished the salat?
Yeah, they remembered after they finished the
They
salah.
might have to make with the water. I think that they have to run that back.
They're going to have to pray over. They're going to have to, as they say, repeat the prayer. Make wudu with the water, and then repeat the prayer. As the mistake in forgetting that they can get to the water is they didn't pray like that intentionally, so it's no sin on them. But the fact that there's no sin on them doesn't mean that that worship is correct like that. That they had the ability to use the water and they didn't use the water. Oh yeah. Now he says, وَفُرُوضُهُ, the arkan, the pillars of tayammum. What has to be done when a person is making a tayammum. He says, number one, مسح وجهه, the wiping of the face. The wiping of the face. So, as in the hadith says that a person, they tap on the dirt or whatever they're using to get the dust, they tap on it. And now what do they have to do? They're going to, one, wipe the face. The face, the same way you wipe the face in wudu. Right? Number two, وَيَدَيْهِ إِلَى كُرْعِيهِ, and they wipe the hand up into the wrist. And that's it. That they don't have, nobody's wiping, you don't have to wipe up to the elbow with dirt like you're making wudu with water, based on the hadith. So the first thing is the wiping of the face, and the second thing is the wiping of the hands up into the wrist. This would be, and there are two more. This would be the case if a person was making tayammum for ghusl. And he says, well, fi asghar, but if a person was making tayammum for wudhu, like maybe most people do, usually, I say usually the case is you're out somewhere, right? And you have to make wudu, there's no water. What do we do? Most people, usually people don't go out and about throughout the day and they normally need to make ghusl. Right? So usually a person has to make wudu. So in wudu, then he adds two more conditions. It has to be done in order. The same order that you would, because the only thing being wiped in tayammum is the face and the hands. So now they have to be done in order. They have to be done in order, which means the face comes first and then the hands. We're not talking about the sunnah hand, washing the hands in the beginning. We're talking about the obligatory washing of the hands in wudu, which comes after we do the mouth, the nose, and the face. Then you do the right hand and the left hand. So if a person is making tayammum for wudu, then they would do the face first, they wipe the face first, and then wipe the hands up into the wrist. That would be number three. Number four will be muwalat, ayla. That is continuous, meaning there's no long space between the wiping of the face and the wiping of the hands up into the wrist bone. That a person doesn't wipe their face, and then they, as we say in wudu, like in wudu, you wipe and then the bone dries off, and then you go back and wipe again as you do it in a continuous motion if a person is making wudu. So all together will be 4 pillars for wudu, if you're making tayammum for wudu, and 2 pillars if you're making tayammum for ghusl. Right? Both of them include wiping the face and the hands up into the wrist bone. And then for the wudu, 2 more added that you do that in order, which means wiping the face first, then wiping the right hand and then the left hand, and that you do it continuously without taking long breaks between the wiping. طيب. He mentions another condition. He says, وَنِيَّةُ الْإِسْتِبَاحَةِ شَرْطٌ لِمَا يَتَيَمَّمْ لَهُ. Also, that a person, and this is based on another disagreement that the scholars have, that a person, when they make their intention for a tayammum, that they intend for it, the allowance, we'll say, they intend to be allowed to, for example, if I want to make Isha, my intention is to make tayammum in order to pray Isha, right? And this issue goes back to what does tayammum, making the wudu with the dust, actually do? Does it remove that block so we can pray? And this is one of the issues that they disagree on, the scholars. When a person makes tayammum and they don't use water, they use the dust, does that remove the hadith? Does that remove the block that allows me to pray? Or does it just, is it, as we say, it's a pass for me to pray? It's a pass for you to do that worship, but in reality, after that worship, you still, and the water comes and some other things happen, that you still, it doesn't remove the actual hadith. They disagree on that, which affects other things like this. This is one of the issues that it affects. So you would have to make the intention, my intention for making the tayammum in this case, is that I'm allowed to pray like this, Salat al-Isha. So if I did that, I made tayammum in order to be able to pray the Salah. It says, وَلَا يُصَلِّ بِهِ فَرَضًا إِن نَوَى نَفْلًا أَوْ أَطْلَقًا. Now, the intention or the tayammum is connected to what you intended. So if you intended to pray, for example, a person made tayammum, and they said, for example, they're making tayammum and they want to pray 2 rak'ah between the adhan and the iqamah. Right? 2 voluntary rak'ah between the adhan and the iqamah. Based on this position, that what? It only allows you to do what you intend. That means that they can't pray Isha with that same tayammum. Why? Because the tayammum only allows you to do what you intended to do. It doesn't remove the whole barrier for you to pray whatever you want to pray. The others say no, you can, but based on the position of the author. So if I made the tayammum, I intended to pray a voluntary prayer, I wouldn't be able to pray a prayer that is obligatory, that it has a higher level than that prayer. Clear? And this is based on the fact that, based on the position that the tayammum does what? It allows you to do that worship that you intend. It doesn't actually remove you from the state of being, as we say, in pure hadith, the hadith asghar. Right? طيب. He says, وَيَبْطُلُ بِخُرُوجِ وَقْتٍ. طيب. Now he goes to the things that break, they invalidate, let's say it invalidates. What invalidates that tayammum? طيب. What invalidates that tayammum? Invalidates that tayammum. There you go. طيب. Meaning, I make tayammum for Isha. طيب. My niyyah was the istibaha, to pray the salah, that I'm allowed to pray the salah with that tayammum. طيب. When does that tayammum break, as we say the wudu breaks? After you pray? Not necessarily. It's connected to the prayer, but it's not when the prayer is over, because there's sunnahs after the prayer connected to it. And if I make the intention for the obligatory, I can pray the voluntary that's less than the obligatory. But if I make the intention for the involuntary, I can't pray something that's higher than that, according to their code. So I might pray Isha, and I might pray as soon as after Isha, right? Or any of the other salawat. So he says, number one, what breaks it, meaning, breaks the tayammum, meaning like break the wudhu. Meaning I would have to make another tayammum in order to do something else if I wanted to pray again. He says, بِخُرُوجِ الْوَقْتِ, the end of the time for that salat time is finished. So if I made tayammum for dhuhr, and then they call the adhan for asr, I have to make tayammum again if I don't have any water or something like that. If I'm in the same situation and nothing changed, I look for water, there's nothing, right? I have to make a new tayammum because the time of the salat ended. That's number one. Number two, anything that breaks the wudu breaks the tayammum. So using the bathroom, falling asleep, right? Anything that would break the wudu, touching your wife or the wife touching the husband with desire, anything that breaks the wudu also breaks the wudu with tayammum. So a person will have to make tayammum again if they did any of those things. And the third thing, for the person, because remember, a tayammum is not only for people who have no water, but it's for people who also, can't use water. They can't get to it, or they can't use it. There's water there, but I can't wipe this. I can't put water on this because it's going to cause more damage. So for the person who made tayammum because there was no water around, there was no water, the tayammum is broken when the water becomes available. Oh, it's water now. I can get to the water. I can use the water. That tayammum is broken. I hope this is clear. Right? Meaning, if the water, some people, for example, I have an injury, whether the water is there or not, I can't use it. The water is sitting there in front of me. I can't use it because I can't put it on this scar or on this injury. So whether the water there or the water not there, I have to make tayammum for my safety. But what if I made tayammum because there was no water? I looked around, I waited to almost the next time for the next salat. I didn't find any water, so I made tayammum and I prayed. We finish. The next prayer comes in, right? I make tayammum for the next prayer. I'm ready to pray, and what happens? Water becomes available before we pray. There's water here now. Once that water is there and available, it breaks that tayammum that I made, even though it was a brand new wudhu or tayammum. So those are the three things that break it. Everything, or the end of that salat time, or everything that breaks the wudhu, breaks the tayammum, or water becomes available for the person who it was not available for, the water becomes available, that also breaks the tayammum. He said earlier that in order to make the tayammum, to use the dust or the sand, that a person has to, or it has to be time for the salah. There then has to be called for that prayer in order to make tayammum for that prayer. So right now, if the adhan for Isha is not called, I shouldn't make tayammum. I can't make tayammum for Isha. Right? Once they call the adhan for Isha, I can make tayammum to pray Salat al-Isha. But it's recommended, they don't have to, he says sunnah, is recommended لِرَاجِهِ تَأْخِيرُ لِآخِرِ وَقْتِ الْمُخْتَارِ. He said it's recommended for a person to delay, even though the salat time entered, it's recommended to delay making the tayammum to the end, not when the stars get ready to go out. The waqt mukhtar, until the end of the waqt mukhtar for the salat. Right? The end of the best time to pray that salat. Meaning you don't want to wait until, for example, you don't want to wait until the salat is going out in 2 minutes. That's waqt al-ula. You want to wait as long as possible without putting yourself in a jam where, for example, you can't pray 4 rak'ah in 2 minutes. Right? And you don't want to pray 4 rak'ah in 4 minutes where you're rushing and there's no khushu'. right? So the delay is not that far to put yourself in the jam where you have to rush. And that is the recommended thing to do. A person can pray as soon as the salat comes in. But what's the benefit of waiting towards the end of or later on? The water might come. A person may be able to get water, and it's better. If a person has the ability, then it's better to use the water. Tayyib. Now he discusses, and this is the last issue here, what if the situation is where a person can't use the water, or there is no water, and there is nothing to make tayammum with. There's nothing that a person could tap on to get the dust to make the tayammum with. He says, وَمَنْ عَلِمَ الْمَاءِ وَالتُّرَابِ أَوْ لَمْ يُمْكِنْهُ اسْتِعْمَالُهُمَا. There is no water, there is no dirt around, or they're not able to use the water and they're not able to use the dirt. Clear? There is no water, or there is water but he can't or she can't use the water. Or there is no dirt around, or they're not able to use the dirt. So they can't use either of the two options that we have for purifying ourselves for the salah. What does a person do? How would they purify themselves? Do they do anything? Pray. Pray. Jay, pray. Salat al-Fard. You pray because there is no time where we just don't pray. If it was worst case scenario, we didn't meet the conditions and we were in a situation, we pray, as they say, ala halihi. Based whatever condition you're in, you pray like that. Not that you want to pray like that, but in a situation of necessity, a person is not able to get to the water, they can't use the water, they can't use the dirt, or they can't get to the dirt. صَلَّى الْفَرْض فَقَطْ عَلَى حَسْبِ حَالِهِ وَلَا إِعَادَةٍ. If that was the case, they say they only pray the obligatory prayer. They only pray the obligatory prayer and they wouldn't have to repeat it. So now they give detail on when praying that obligatory prayer. So when praying that obligatory prayer, right, they say what? This is a situation of dire necessity. So in a situation of dire necessity, they say you should do the most important things only. Because in reality, a person didn't make wudu with water and they didn't make tayammum. They just had to pray like that based on the situation. So they say in this case, do the bare minimum that is obligatory to do. So he says, number one, that they only pray like this. They only pray, when they pray like this, that they only pray the obligatory prayers, meaning they don't pray the sunnahs. طيب. It says, وَيَقْتَصِرُوا عَلَى مُجْزِئٍ. And they only do the things in the salah that are going to allow the salah to be valid. So for example, in order for any salah to be valid, what are some things that a person has to do? Bare minimum things that a person has to do in order for salah to be valid.
The bare minimum you have to do is, of course, the stand-in.
The stand-in. Al-Fatiha. At least, meaning they read Al-Fatiha and they don't read a surah after that, they're saying. Only read Al-Fatiha. Only read what you need to read to get through, because they say this is waqt al-durura. This is the dire necessity, so only do the things that are going to allow the salah to be valid. So when they go into ruku', right? Once. They say to do ruku', subhana rabbil azim, one time. When they go on sajda, they say, subhana, one time. They do everything bare minimum. Tayyib. This is for the person who didn't use water, or they weren't able to use water, and they didn't use the dirt, they didn't make tayammum either. They just pray how they are. Based on their situation, they do the bare minimum in order for the salat to be valid. So, after doing that, It says, وَلَا يَقْرَأُ فِي غَيْرِ الصَّلَاةِ إِنْ كَانَ جُنُوبًا. So, let's say for example, the person needed to make a ghusl. The person needed to make a ghusl. They weren't able to get the water, or they weren't able to use the water. So what they had, what's the next option? If they can't use the water, they make tayammum with the dirt. They weren't able to make the tayammum either. And we know the person that's junub, the person who needs to make a ghusl, they shouldn't read the Quran. They shouldn't recite the Quran. They shouldn't read from the Quran. Tayyib. So what happens when the person that's junub couldn't use water and they couldn't use dirt to clean themselves for the salah? They had to pray, which means they were forced to do what? They were forced to read the Quran, which is not supposed to be done, right? So for that fact, he says,
read or recite?
Recite.
Okay.
Recite. Of course, you can't touch the Mus'haf. You can't touch the Mus'haf without wudu, let alone ghusl. So now he says, he doesn't, وَلَا يَقْرَأ. I get sometimes, yaqra, read, recite. Jazakallah khair, that's important. So he says he doesn't recite outside of the salah if they need to make a ghusl. Meaning they were allowed to recite in the salah based on the situation. But outside of the salah, they still junub. They still need to make a ghusl so that they shouldn't recite outside of the salah. And that is the end of the chapter of Tayammum. And we'll stop there for the salah. Inshallah, we'll pick up next week with the chapter of removing the najasa, the impurities, which is important. And the last chapter in Kitab al-Tahara is the chapter of the menses. Faslun fil hayd. Maybe, I'm not sure if we might get to start that next week, the menses. Well, the chapter before that is a little shorter, but we'll see. We'll stop there unless there's any questions. We'll stop there, inshallah. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.